Captain Elena stepped onto the gleaming docking bay of the Galactic Council station, her bridge crew following in crisp formation despite their worn uniforms. The contrast was immediate and stark. Every surface of the station gleamed with materials unknown to human science, while holographic indicators floated effortlessly through the air. The welcoming committee consisted of representatives from 5 different council species, each more exotic than the last. "Welcome to Harmonious Accord Station," announced the Acridian diplomat, its translucent exoskeleton shifting through shades of blue and green. "We have prepared accommodation suitable for your biological requirements." Elena nodded professionally. "Thank you for your hospitality. The United Earth government appreciates the Council's willingness to hear our perspective on the Vraxian situation." A tall, willowy being with 4 arms and silver skin made a sound like chiming bells. Their version of laughter. "Perspective. What perspective could your species possibly offer on interstellar conflict management? Your civilization only achieved faster-than-light capability 43 standard cycles ago." Commander Ortiz tensed beside Elena, but she gave him a subtle hand signal to remain calm. This wasn't the first time humans had been underestimated, and she doubted it would be the last. "Sometimes fresh eyes see patterns that familiar ones miss," she replied evenly. The delegation was escorted through corridors filled with representatives from dozens of advanced civilizations. Conversations hushed as the humans passed, followed by whispers and occasional bursts of what universal translators identified as expressions of amusement or pity. "Your vessel's power signature barely registered on our sensors," commented a bulbous, floating creature as they entered a transport tube. "How does it generate sufficient energy for interstellar travel?" "The Resilient uses a modified fusion singularity hybrid system," answered Chief Engineer Taylor. "It's not the latest model, but it's reliable." The aliens exchanged glances that clearly communicated their skepticism. "And those exterior hull plates," continued a reptilian being with feathered crests. "Is that actually physical armor?" "Most civilized vessels use energetic barrier systems exclusively. Sometimes you need something solid between you and the vacuum," Elena replied. "Shields can fail when power fluctuates. Titanium ceramic composite doesn't." The transport tube deposited them at the entrance to their assigned quarters, notably smaller and farther from the central chambers than the accommodations for other delegations. Elena dismissed her crew to settle in, keeping only Ortiz and communications specialist Rivera for the preliminary diplomatic meeting. As they approached the Council's strategy room, they passed a viewing window overlooking the military vessels gathered for the emergency summit. Sleek Tellurian light cruisers with their characteristic golden force fields. Massive Xanthi dreadnoughts that seemed to bend space around them. Acridian carriers surrounded by clouds of automated drone fighters no larger than shuttlecraft. And there, dwarfed among these marvels of advanced technology, the UNSS Resilient floated like a relic from another era. Its blocky profile and battle-scarred hull made it look like a primitive battering ram among elegant rapiers. "They're broadcasting messages about us on open channels," Rivera murmured, her neural interface picking up nearby communications. "They're calling us primates playing with starships and betting on how long we'd last against a single Vraxian scout vessel." "Let them underestimate us," Elena replied quietly. "Humanity has always done its best work when nobody expects anything from us." As they entered the strategy room, a holographic display activated, showing the advancing Vraxian fleet, a copper-colored swarm consuming everything in its path. Elena studied the pattern of the invasion and felt a chill of recognition. She had seen this before, in historical accounts of ancient Earth conflicts. The Vraxians were using tactics that humans had abandoned centuries ago, not because they were ineffective, but because they were too brutal to contemplate using against other humans. The Council was about to learn that sometimes the oldest lessons were the most valuable. The Council chamber's advanced holographic display shifted to show the Vraxian Armada's movements through the Cygnus arm. Elena studied the patterns while the senior delegates debated among themselves, occasionally casting dismissive glances toward the human observers. The quantum disruption fields have rendered our primary weapon systems ineffective in 3 consecutive engagements, announced a Tellurian admiral, his translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent concern. Even the Xanthi phase cannons are being absorbed and redirected. Elena leaned toward Commander Ortiz. Notice how they're moving in overlapping waves. That's an ancient Earth tactic. The Mongol horsemen used it to overwhelm larger forces. Feint, withdraw. Feint again from another direction. Xanthi Delegate Moro, intoned High Commander Thrix, please share your analysis of potential countermeasures. The massive Xanthi rose on his gravity nullifiers, tentacles gesturing at the display. We propose a unified shield matrix, linking all Council vessels to create a quantum resonance barrier that the Vraxians cannot penetrate. Our simulations suggest. Excuse me, Elena interrupted, unable to contain herself any longer. I believe I've identified a potential vulnerability in the Vraxian approach. The chamber fell silent. Dozens of alien faces turned toward her, with expressions ranging from surprise to irritation at the interruption. The human delegation has not been recognized, stated a protocol officer. High Commander Thrix fluttered luminescent appendages in what Elena's cultural briefing had identified as the Acridian equivalent of an indulgent smile. Let us hear what our new associates have observed. Perhaps there is value in fresh perspective. The condescension was palpable, but Elena seized the opportunity. She approached the central display, aware of the whispers around her. The Vraxian ships move in these coordinated patterns, she said, highlighting sections of the display. But look at the command vessels here, and here. They always maintain specific distances from their support craft. This suggests their quantum disruption technology requires precise spacing to function effectively. A Xanthi scientist made a burbling sound. Of course they maintain formation. All advanced fleet actions require positional discipline. Not like this, Elena persisted. Their formations never vary by more than 3%, even when tactically disadvantageous. This indicates a technical limitation, not a strategic choice. High Commander Thrix's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. An interesting theory, Captain. However, our analysis suggests. Furthermore, Elena continued, emboldened, their communication patterns show signs of centralized control rather than distributed command. If we could disrupt the lead vessel's coordination capabilities. The Tellurian admiral waved a translucent hand dismissively. Primitive electronic warfare would be useless against quantum-encrypted communications. Not electronic warfare, Elena clarified. Physical disruption of their formation integrity. The chamber erupted with sounds that the universal translator struggled to interpret, alien equivalents of scoffs, chuckles, and dismissive comments. You proposed throwing rocks at them, asked the serpentine delegate, generating ripples of amusement throughout the chamber. Sometimes the simplest solutions are overlooked, Elena replied evenly. The Resilient carry specialized kinetic dispersal munitions that cooled. Thank you, Captain, for your contribution, High Commander Thrix interrupted. We will add your perspective to our consideration matrix. Now, returning to viable strategic options. Elena returned to her seat, jaw tight with frustration. Commander Ortiz gave her a sympathetic glance. They're not ready to listen, he whispered. They'll have to, Elena replied quietly. Because nothing in their quantum shield harmonics and temporal displacement tactics will work against an enemy using strategies from Earth's ancient warfare handbook. The technological gap between humanity and the Council races had never seemed wider, but Elena was beginning to suspect that the Council's technological superiority had become a vulnerability. They had advanced so far beyond certain fundamental principles that they couldn't recognize the elegant simplicity of what the Vraxians were doing, or how to counter it. As the Council members resumed their debate about increasingly complex defensive algorithms, Elena noticed a small Meridian observer watching her with unusual intensity, the only alien in the room who seemed to be taking her seriously. Perhaps not everyone was blinded by technological superiority after all. The emergency sirens blared with harmonics designed for multiple species hearing ranges, creating a disorienting cacophony for the human delegation. Alina's comm unit crackled as Lieutenant Chen reported from their security detail. Captain, 6 Vraxian warships just appeared at the edge of the system. They bypassed all early warning systems. Council defense grid is scrambling, but their response seems uncoordinated. Alina exchanged a quick glance with Commander Ortiz. Exactly as we predicted. They're striking during diplomatic talks when defenses are divided. Around them, Council representatives hurried toward designated shelter areas, their previously ordered movements dissolving into barely controlled panic. No one had expected an attack on the station itself, a diplomatic sanctuary under interstellar law. This way to the secure bunkers, urged a Meridian security officer, gesturing toward a glowing portal. Belay that, Alina commanded her team. We're returning to the Resilient immediately. The small Meridian observer who had shown interest in Alina's tactical assessment earlier approached rapidly. Captain Rice, I am Diplomatic Observer Leth. Your ship is scheduled for lockdown during the emergency response. All civilian vessels must. The Resilient is a combat vessel, and we're activating now. Alina interrupted, already moving against the flow of evacuating delegates. But your ship has been designated as. Observer Leth trailed off, realizing the humans were already heading toward the docking bay. The station shuddered as the first Vraxian weapons fire impacted the outer defensive screens. Through observation windows, Alina could see Council vessels activating in seemingly random patterns, their coordinated defense plan clearly disrupted by the unexpected vector of attack. Just as you suggested, Ortiz noted as they double-timed through the corridors. They targeted the command and communication systems first. Alina nodded grimly. Classic asymmetric warfare. Target the nervous system before engaging the muscles. They reached the docking bay to find station security attempting to lock down all vessels. Lieutenant Rivera stepped forward, rapidly explaining in the shared diplomatic language that the human vessel was combat-capable and prepared to assist in defense. The security chief, a towering Xanthi, seemed conflicted. Your vessel has been classified as observation status only, he rumbled through a translator. Override classification Alpha 7, Alina stated firmly. Emergency protocol allows all combat-capable vessels to engage during station defense. The security chief's upper eye stalks wavered in confusion before he checked his data terminal. This protocol exists, yes. But your vessel. Another impact rocked the station, harder this time. Status alerts flashed around them, as the main defensive screen reported 30% capacity loss. We don't have time to debate, Alina insisted. Either authorize our launch or we'll override the docking clamps manually. The threat worked. The Xanthi security chief entered the override, and the docking bay doors began to cycle open. Council defensive coordination is failing, Rivera reported, monitoring station communications through her neural interface. The Vraxian quantum fields are disrupting their targeting systems and communications. As they rushed up the Resilience boarding ramp, Alina saw Observer Leth watching them from across the bay. The Meridian made a gesture that the translator interpreted as both a salute and a blessing. On the bridge, Chen had already powered up the ship's systems and run the pre-combat checklist. The ancient vessel hummed with energy that belied its worn exterior. All stations report ready, Captain. Ortiz confirmed as Alina took her command chair. Reactor at 90% and holding stable. Chief Engineer Taylor reported from engineering. Weapon systems online and unaffected by quantum disruption. Through the viewports, Alina could see the Council's prized fleet faltering. The sleek Tellurian cruisers fired sophisticated energy weapons that dissipated harmlessly against Vraxian shields. The massive Xanthi dreadnought's quantum cannons seemed to pass straight through their targets without effect. They're not coordinating, Alina observed. Each ship is fighting independently. Just like prehistoric Earth armies before unified command structures, Ortiz noted. Alina's hands tightened on the armrests of her command chair. Let's show them how humans fight. Tactical, prepare kinetic disruptors. Navigation, Plot intercept course with the lead Vraxian vessel. The Resilient detached from its moorings and accelerated toward battle, its ancient engines flaring with unexpected power. The Resilient surged forward on a trajectory that appeared erratic to outside observers, but followed a carefully plotted course through the debris field created by the initial Vraxian assault. On the bridge, Alina's crew operated with practiced efficiency that came from countless drills rather than the AI assistance that Council ships relied upon. Vraxian vessels are focusing on the Tellurian flagship, reported Lieutenant Chen from Tactical. They haven't adjusted their sensor arrays to track smaller objects. We're effectively running silent. Alina nodded. They're looking for energy signatures, not physical mass. Maintain minimal power emissions until we reach firing position. Through the view screen, they watched a massive Xanthi dreadnought fire its primary weapon, a beam of concentrated quantum energy that should have sliced through any conventional hull. Instead, the beam diffused around the Vraxian vessel in a spectacular display of refracted light. Their quantum absorption fields are even more effective than intelligence suggested, Commander Ortiz observed grimly. But not impervious, Alina replied. Engineering. Status on the kinetic disruptors. Chief Engineer Taylor's voice came through the comm. Disruptors armed and calibrated for electromagnetic pulse effect, Captain. The outer casings are cold launch ready. No energy signature until secondary ignition. Alina studied the tactical display, watching the geometric patterns of the Vraxian attack formation. They're maintaining the exact spacing I noted in the briefing data. Look at their command vessel. It never varies position relative to its support craft. The Resilient slipped behind a section of destroyed Council defensive platform, using it as cover. We're in optimal firing position, Chen announced. Launch disruptors, full spread, Alina ordered. Target the gaps in their formation. Unlike the brilliant energy weapons favored by Council ships, the Resilience launchers made barely a whisper as they released what appeared to be simple projectiles. The objects drifted initially, powered only by their launch momentum, registering as debris on most scanning systems. Secondary ignition in 3, 2, 1. Chen counted down. The projectiles suddenly accelerated, each following a distinct trajectory between the Vraxian vessels rather than toward them. The enemy ships ignored the apparent debris until the first detonation occurred. Instead of a conventional explosion, the disruptor released a precisely calculated electromagnetic pulse combined with particles specifically designed to interact with quantum field generators. The effect rippled through the carefully maintained Vraxian formation as their quantum fields destabilized, creating a cascading failure. Direct hit on their field generators, Ortiz reported, unable to keep the surprise from his voice despite the simulations they had run. 3 Vraxian vessels have lost shield protection. The Council communications channels erupted with confused chatter. What just happened? The enemy shields are fluctuating. How did they lose containment? Alina leaned forward. Now, Lieutenant Chen. Conventional railgun barrage on the exposed vessels while they're recalibrating. The Resilience secondary weapons system activated, a series of electromagnetically accelerated projectiles that required no exotic energy signatures to function. Simple tungsten rods accelerated to incredible velocities, struck the suddenly vulnerable Vraxian ships with devastating precision. One enemy vessel's engine section crumpled under the impact, sending it spinning out of formation. Another suffered multiple hull breaches that vented atmosphere into space. The Vraxians are adjusting formation, Rivera reported from communications. They're moving to protect their damaged vessels. Perfect, Alina replied with grim satisfaction. They're breaking their optimal spacing configuration. Tactical, prepare second wave of disruptors with modified frequencies. On the Council command channel, a Tellurian admiral's voice cut through the confusion. Unidentified vessel, what weapon system are you employing against the Vraxian shields? Alina allowed herself a small smile as she responded. This is Captain Rice of the UNSS Resilient. We're not using any exotic weapon system, Admiral. Just old-fashioned physics and electromagnetic principles that predate quantum field theory. The silence on the channel spoke volumes before the Admiral responded. "Can your methods be adapted to our vessels?" "Absolutely," Elena replied. "But first, we need to disrupt the Vraxian command ship before they can adapt. Request permission to lead the next attack phase." The Tellurian Admiral's response came without hesitation. "Permission granted, Captain. What do you need from us?" The Council observation deck had transformed into an impromptu tactical center as senior representatives gathered to watch the battle unfold. The massive display tracked the Resilient as it executed maneuvers that Council ship AIs had rejected as suboptimal during thousands of simulations. "Impossible," muttered a Xanthi tactical officer, his tentacles twitching in agitation. "That turn radius exceeds structural limitations for a vessel of that mass." High Commander Thrix studied the data scrolling across auxiliary screens. Their power signature just spiked beyond anything their reactor should be capable of producing. Observer Leth approached quietly. "I believe we have significantly underestimated our human allies, Commander." On the screen, the Resilient pivoted sharply, absorbing a glancing blow from a Vraxian energy weapon. Where Council ships relied on deflection shields, the human vessel's hull actually absorbed and dispersed the impact, its surface glowing briefly before radiative panels ejected the heat into space. "That's not conventional armor," noted a Tellurian engineer. "The material properties don't match any alloy in our database." The battle continued as 3 Council cruisers, following Captain Ray's tactical guidance, positioned themselves to support the Resilient's assault on the Vraxian command ship. The human vessel launched another spread of modified disruptors, creating gaps in the enemy's quantum fields that the Council ships immediately exploited with precisely timed energy weapon strikes. "They're coordinating their attack with ours," the Tellurian Admiral observed with surprise. "How are they calculating targeting solutions so quickly without quantum processors?" The answer came unexpectedly as a breach in the Resilient's communication security gave the Council observers a glimpse into the human ship's operations. Camera feeds showed the bridge crew working with a combination of holographic displays and, most surprisingly, physical control interfaces that required no neural connection. "They're doing manual calculations," gasped a Council technician. "Their targeting systems use predictive algorithms based on..." He paused, checking his data. Historical combat analysis rather than real-time quantum probability mapping. High Commander Thrix's bioluminescence pulsed with realization. They don't rely on systems vulnerable to quantum disruption because their technology evolved along a different path. On another screen, Council observers watched in shock as a Vraxian boarding party materialized inside the Resilient's cargo bay, having bypassed the ship's seemingly minimal security fields. The expectation was immediate disaster. Council species had long ago delegated physical combat to specialized units or security drones. Instead, camera feeds showed the human crew responding with coordinated precision. Security teams wearing armored exosuits moved with practiced efficiency, using weapons that fired simple projectiles rather than energy beams easily absorbed by Vraxian personal shields. "Those are ballistic weapons," whispered a Council security chief. "Physical projectiles accelerated by chemical reactions. Archaic, but effective," finished Observer Leth as they watched a human security officer neutralize 3 Vraxian boarders in rapid succession. The most startling revelation came when an engineering diagnostic was accidentally transmitted to the Council command network. The Resilient's power core wasn't the fusion reactor listed in its specifications. Deep within the human vessel sat a contained microsingularity, a miniaturized black hole harnessed as an energy source, surrounded by layers of gravitational containment fields unlike anything in Council technical archives. "They've mastered singularity containment," breathed the Xanthi scientist. "We theorized this was possible but deemed it too dangerous to attempt." High Commander Thrix turned to his staff. "I want a complete reassessment of human technological capabilities immediately, and open a priority channel to Captain Reyes." On the main screen, The Resilient executed another impossible maneuver, slipping between two Vraxian destroyers and launching what appeared to be simple missiles toward the enemy command ship. The missiles detonated not against the vessel, but in carefully calculated positions around it, creating a complex interference pattern that collapsed its quantum field from multiple vectors simultaneously. Primitive, indeed, Observer Leth remarked softly as the Vraxian command ship shields failed catastrophically. Perhaps we have been the primitive ones, too reliant on our advanced technology to recognize the elegant solutions developed through a different evolutionary path. The emergency council chamber hummed with tension as Captain Alina Reyes stood before the hastily assembled delegates. The human officer looked small among the diverse alien representatives, yet she commanded the room's complete attention. Holographic displays showed the aftermath of the battle. Debris from destroyed Vraxian vessels scattered across space while damage assessment reports scrolled alongside. The Vraxian attack force has been neutralized, High Commander Thrix announced, his translucent appendages glowing with formal colors of respect. We owe this outcome largely to Captain Reyes and the crew of the human vessel Resilient. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, acknowledgement rather than the dismissive whispers from earlier sessions. The Xanthi representative who had mocked human technology now leaned forward, eye stalks fixed intently on Alina. Captain, we have analyzed your tactical approach. You anticipated Vraxian maneuvers with 87% accuracy, significantly exceeding our predictive models. How did you achieve this without quantum probability mapping? Alina gestured to the tactical display. We used pattern recognition based on historical Earth conflicts. The Vraxians employ variations of what we call wolf pack tactics. Developed by German naval forces during our Second World War, nearly 5 centuries ago. She manipulated the display to show ancient Earth naval battles alongside the recent Vraxian formations. The similarities were unmistakable. Your civilizations have enjoyed peace for so long that certain aggressive tactical doctrines have been forgotten. Alina continued. Humans have spent more time fighting each other than you've spent fighting anyone. Our history is brutal, but educational. The Tellurian admiral's skin rippled with colors indicating intellectual excitement. Your weapons bypass their quantum defenses completely. How? Sometimes the simplest answer is the correct one. Alina replied. Your advanced energy weapons are all calibrated to quantum frequencies the Vraxians can detect and counter. Our kinetic disruptors use basic electromagnetic principles, essentially creating localized storms that disrupt field cohesion from the outside, rather than trying to penetrate directly. Commander Ortiz added, it's like trying to punch through a door versus removing its hinges. High Commander Thrix gestured with formal permission for Alina to approach the central strategic table, a position previously denied to the human delegation. Captain Reyes, would you share your assessment of the broader Vraxian threat? Our models suggest they will adapt to your tactics before our next encounter. Alina nodded, manipulating the galactic display. They will adapt, but not quickly. The Vraxian hive structure requires consensus among sub-commanders before implementing major tactical changes. This gives us approximately 3 weeks to prepare a multi-phase strategy. She highlighted key systems along the invasion corridor. Their command structure is hierarchical and centralized. We observed during the battle that destroying their lead vessel caused 16% efficiency reduction across all remaining ships. This vulnerability can be exploited. The Xanthi tactical officer's tentacles twitched in disagreement. Conventional strategic doctrine holds that distributed command networks are vulnerable to disruption. Centralized command should be more resilient. In advanced civilizations, yes, Alina agreed. But the Vraxians evolved from high species. They think collectively rather than individually. Their ships aren't just coordinated. They're extensions of a shared consciousness. Disrupt that consciousness, and the individual components become significantly less effective. She displayed historical Earth battles, wooden ships at Trafalgar, armored divisions in North Africa, fighter squadrons over the Pacific. Throughout human history, We've learned that targeting command and control assets provides disproportionate tactical advantage. Observer Leth, who had been quietly analyzing the human approach, spoke up. Your species developed these concepts through conflict with yourselves. The ethical implications are troubling, yet the effectiveness is undeniable. Helena nodded soberly. We're not proud of our violent history, but we've learned from it. And now that knowledge might save countless lives across the Council worlds. High Commander Thrix's bioluminescence shifted to formal decision patterns. Captain Rice, the Council requests your guidance in developing a comprehensive response to the Vraxian threat. We offer full access to our technical resources in exchange for your tactical expertise. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans, dismissed hours earlier as primitives barely worth a courtesy hearing, were now being invited to lead the strategic response to the greatest threat the Council had faced in generations. The Harmonious Accord Station's central hangar bay had been transformed into an unprecedented cross-species training facility, where once the Resilient had sat in isolation, now teams of Council engineers and tacticians swarmed around it, examining systems they had previously dismissed as primitive. Elena moved between groups of alien specialists, each focused on different aspects of human combat doctrine. In one section, Lieutenant Chen demonstrated targeting protocols to wide-eyed Tellurian weapons officers. Your quantum targeting matrices are incredibly precise, Chen explained, but they're vulnerable to disruption. Our backup systems use optical tracking and ballistic calculations that can't be jammed electronically. Nearby, Commander Ortiz guided Xanthi tacticians through simulation exercises based on historical Earth naval engagements. The massive aliens' tentacles danced across adapted control interfaces as they practiced coordinated maneuvers that their ship's AIs had never considered. Your vessels are faster and more powerful than anything in Earth's fleet, Ortiz noted, but your commanders rely too heavily on algorithmic decision-making. Sometimes intuition and experience outperform perfect calculation. Chief Engineer Taylor had attracted the largest crowd as she explained the Resilience power systems. A holographic display showed the contained microsingularity at the ship's core, surrounded by layers of gravitational containment fields unlike anything in Council technical archives. Yes, it's dangerous, Taylor acknowledged to the nervous Meridian engineers. That's why we built 17 redundant containment systems. If the primary field fails, the backup activates automatically. If that fails, another takes over. But your processing capacity is insufficient to maintain quantum stability in real time, objected a Xanthi scientist. Taylor smiled. We don't try to maintain perfect stability. We designed the system to handle fluctuations within acceptable parameters. It's like riding a wave rather than trying to stop the ocean. Across the hangar, Elena joined High Commander Thrix and Observer Leth as they watched Council security teams practicing against simulated Vraxian boarding parties. Unlike the specialized combat units the Council races traditionally relied upon, humans trained all crew members in basic combat techniques. Your approach to crew specialization is unexpected, Observer Leth noted. Even your scientists and medical personnel train for combat scenarios. Elena nodded. An old Earth military concept called every person a rifleman. Specialized skills are valuable, but basic defensive capability is universal. High Commander Thrix's appendages rippled with thoughtful colors. Your ship's design philosophy follows similar principles. Each system can operate independently if others fail. Exactly, Elena confirmed. Council vessels are marvels of integrated technology, but one critical system failure can cascade throughout the ship. The Resilient is designed to keep functioning despite damage, sometimes at reduced capability, but still operational. A commotion near the engineering section drew their attention. The Tellurian admiral was examining a section of the Resilient's hull armor, his translucent fingers tracing the complex layered structure. This material absorbs and redirects energy rather than reflecting it, he announced to gathered engineers. It's why their ship survived hits that would have breached our hulls. Composite metamaterials, Elena explained as they approached. Developed from Earth's early space program, the outer layer ablates under energy weapons fire, dissipating heat through programmed molecular breakdown. The Admiral's skin flashed with colors of astonishment. Your species developed this without quantum manufacturing techniques. Necessity drives innovation, Elena replied. We couldn't build quantum shields, so we created alternatives that served the same purpose. Observer Leth made a gesture of profound respect. Perhaps that is the most valuable lesson your species offers the Council. When unable to follow one technological path, you find another. We have pursued singular development trajectories for millennia, refining the same fundamental approaches rather than exploring alternatives. High Commander Thrix activated a communication panel. Central Command confirms that Vraxian forces are regrouping at the Proxima boundary. Our retrofitted vessels must be ready within 14 cycles. Elena surveyed the hangar bay, where centuries of human combat experience were being transferred to species who had known mostly peace for generations. The knowledge exchange wasn't one-sided. Council engineers were already suggesting improvements to resilient systems that would make the aging vessel more formidable than ever. We'll be ready, she promised. And this time, the Vraxians will face an enemy they never expected. Council precision combined with human adaptability. The combined fleet assembled at the Proxima boundary presented a sight unprecedented in Council history. Sleek Tellurian cruisers now bristled with what appeared to be primitive kinetic weapon mounts. Massive Xanthi dreadnoughts had been retrofitted with electromagnetic pulse generators based on human designs. Most striking was the formation itself, not the perfect geometric patterns favored by Council tactical doctrine, but an apparently irregular arrangement that disguised carefully planned overlapping fields of fire. On the bridge of the Resilient, now designated as the fleet's command vessel, Elena surveyed the tactical display with quiet pride. 3 weeks of intensive preparation had transformed both ships and crews. Council vessels had adopted human redundancy principles, while the Resilient now incorporated advanced materials and targeting systems shared by their new allies. Vraxian fleet approaching detection perimeter, reported Lieutenant Chen. 87 vessels in standard hive formation. High Commander Thrix, who had insisted on joining the Resilient's bridge crew for the engagement, observed the enemy formation. They appear unchanged from previous encounters. Perhaps they do not expect our adaptations. Or they're confident in their own, Elena replied. Maintain emission control protocols. Let them think we're still relying on quantum targeting systems. The Council fleet remained in passive scanning mode, appearing to the Vraxians as if they were following standard defensive doctrine. Only when the enemy fleet committed to their attack vector did Elena give the order that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. All vessels, initiate Operation Thermopylae. The supposedly disorganized Council formation suddenly revealed its purpose as ships moved with coordinated precision to create a funnel, drawing the Vraxian forces into a carefully prepared kill zone. As the enemy committed to the engagement, the Council ships activated their new hybrid weapon systems, combinations of advanced energy projectors and electromagnetically launched kinetic disruptors that the Vraxian quantum fields couldn't fully counter. The Vraxian hive commanders, encountering unfamiliar tactics, responded with increasing desperation. Their formations, once precisely maintained, began to fragment as Council vessels executed unpredictable maneuvers that no tactical algorithm could anticipate. They're adapting, Commander Ortiz noted as the enemy ships attempted to regroup. Faster than we expected. Execute Phase 2, Elena ordered calmly. At her command, a squadron of smaller vessels that had been concealed among debris fields suddenly activated, racing toward the Vraxian command ships. Leading the strike force was the Resilient, now moving with surprising speed thanks to Council propulsion enhancements. The Vraxians are adjusting to target our squadron, reported Rivera from communications. Their entire fleet is reorienting. Exactly as planned, Elena replied. Main fleet, execute pincer movement now. As the Vraxians focused on the apparent suicide run by Elena's strike force, The larger council vessels swept in from multiple vectors, catching the enemy in a devastating crossfire. The humans had taught the council an ancient Earth tactic, the feint that draws enemy forces out of position, exposing their flanks to the main attack. The resilient strike force punched through the weakened Vraxian defenses, targeting the command vessels with precision. When their modified disruptors detonated in sequence, the effect cascaded through the hive mind communication network, creating confusion throughout the enemy fleet. Vraxian coordination failing, Chen announced, unable to keep excitement from his voice. Their formation is breaking down. The battle lasted another 42 minutes, but the outcome was determined in those first crucial moments. Without their coordinated hive mind tactics, the individual Vraxian vessels fought effectively, but no longer functioned as a unified force. When the last enemy ship retreated, the council communication channels erupted with sounds of celebration in a dozen different species expressions of joy. On the Resilience Bridge, the crew maintained professional composure, though Alina noticed Ortiz allowing himself a small smile. High Commander Thrix's bioluminescence pulsed with formal patterns of highest respect. Captain Rice, the Council owes humanity a debt we cannot easily repay. What was your term? Your old warship has taught us lessons we have forgotten or never knew. Elena nodded acknowledgement. Every species has something to teach and something to learn. We brought our history of conflict. You shared your advanced science. Together, we're stronger than either would be alone. The fleet regrouped for the return journey to Harmonious Accord Station, where the Council was already preparing a formal ceremony to recognize humanity's contribution. The UNSS Resilient took position not at the edges of the formation as before, but at its center, its scared hull now a symbol not of primitive technology, but of wisdom earned through adversity. Observer Leth, who had joined the bridge crew as official council witness, approached Alina as she reviewed the after-action reports. Your species has a saying I discovered in your cultural database. Don't judge a book by its cover. I believe we have learned this lesson thoroughly. Alina smiled. We have another saying too. The most valuable tools often look the most worn. The old warship that had once been mocked now led the victorious fleet home. Its battle scars transformed from marks of shame to badges of honor, respected not despite its age and history, but because of them.